On day 5, we're going to be going on a long journey. We're going to leave Tiberius and head south along the Jordan River, driving up around Jericho and up to Jerusalem. Once we have entered Jerusalem, we're going to drive over and see St. Peter in Galicantu and look at its observation point. Then we're going to drive down to Bethlehem, where we'll visit the Nissan Brothers new store and eat lunch there before going on to the Church of the Nativity. Then our last stop of the day will be the Shepherd's Field Church, where we'll have a worship service and then drive back to our hotel for the night. As we leave Tiberius, we pass Tiberius Hot Springs, or Hamat Tiberius. It and Hamat Gadara on the other side of the Sea of Galilee were major healing places in the Roman Empire. In fact, they'd be like the Mayo Clinic of their time. People came as far as from Rome to bathe in these places and to be treated by their doctors. Maybe that's why so many sick people were here in the Galilee for Jesus to heal. There were 17 hot springs here, and they still flow today from the springs. There was a 3rd century synagogue here, and there's a modern day hot springs where you can have spa treatment. On down the road we see a fish farm, tilapia, not catfish. And then we see the Jordan River flowing out of the Sea of Galilee and get our last look at the Sea of Galilee. The Jordan Rift Valley is basically a desert. Each side of the Jordan River, called the Gore, is not well watered at all. The Zor, which is the channel it runs in, is watered well and is called the Jungle of the Jordan. 65 miles from the Sea of Galilee to the Dead Sea, but the water flows 160 miles and drops almost 900 feet. And here's a look as we cross the Jordan River. As we keep on heading south, we come to an international border. Those flags over there are in Jordan. That's the corner of Jordan, and where Jordan and Israel come together on the Jordan River. Since the river flows rather deep in its channel, you will not see it very often, even though we're driving right by it. In fact, this will be about the last time we see it. As said before, the left side now is going to be looking over into Jordan, across the Jordan River. On our right side will be Samaria, and particularly right here, this is Mount Gilboa. This is the mountain where Saul and Jonathan and his army fought the Philistines, and Saul, the first king of Israel, was killed on this mountain by the Philistines. You can see that the mountains of Samaria are basically deserts because there's not much rain, and it is very dry here in this area. But they're able to start growing some crops now because of irrigation, and small towns are popping up everywhere. Notice that these have individual dwellings, whereas if you were to live in a city, you would be living in an apartment. And also they're starting to plant lots of date palms everywhere. The reason is they can use trickle irrigation from secondary water source of purified water, and so they're able to grow them on this land. As said, the Jordan River flows in a very deep valley, and so you cannot see it. But on the other side, that's Jordan, the greenhouses and the mountains of Jordan. That is the direction that Israel came from during the Exodus as they entered the Holy Land. And now we again see the electronic fence. It's not directly on the border. The river is the border, but it's to help control who comes into and out of the nation from that area. We also start to see Bedouins and their flocks. The legend is that God sent 3 angels out when the world was being created with rocks to scatter on the earth, and 2 of them ran into each other over Israel and dumped their whole load. And you can see there is a lot of rocks here. The wilderness in this area is not sand, it's stone, limestone, and it has many caves in it. The area is starting to change though as they plant more and more date palms, because now they're starting to see a lot of vegetation instead of just a wilderness area. About halfway to Jerusalem, we take a rest break, stretch our legs, and to use the restroom. As we drive on along, there on the left is Mount Nebo, the highest point over there. We'll be over there in a few days, looking from there in this direction. And then on the right is the wilderness of Judea. This is the area that Jesus wandered in for 40 days and 40 nights. As you can see, there would have been a lot of rocks to change into bread if he wanted to feed the world. And now we make the curve around Jericho. We'll be back there later and head upward almost 3,000 feet into Jerusalem. We start to see Bedouin camps, but you'll notice that these homes are permanent structures made out of metal and tin and concrete. When I first came, they looked like this with tents, but they've forgotten how to make these tents, and they're so difficult when it's easier just to grab a piece of tin. And this is the green fields of the pastures for the shepherds. You don't feed your flocks in fields of alfalfa. You feed them on places like this in the wilderness, on little tufts of grass which are scattered all over these hills. Few of the Bedouins make their living by raising sheep and goats nowadays. They do raise them still, but they usually have jobs in town, and you can see the vehicles they use to go in, and maybe even a satellite dish or two. You know, they also have camels. This large herd of camels is not wild. It's owned by somebody, but just hangs around and grazes out in the fields. Soon we're passing Me'ali Adonim, the largest Jewish settlement on the West Bank, just outside of Jerusalem. And then there in the distance is Bethany. The road actually used to go through the middle of Bethany, and in Jesus' day it did, and he stopped here often. But now the separation wall keeps people out from this area and takes so many hours to get into it, so we'll not be going to see the home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, and we will not be going down the steps through the rock-cut tunnel to see the grave of Lazarus that he rose from the dead. This is a view of the backside of the Mount of Olives, looking up it as Jesus would have walked up. But we're going to go through a tunnel through Mount Scopus, the modern way of getting into Jerusalem. And there as we come out is the modern city of Jerusalem and the old city, the Dome of the Rock. And then we're at the Mount of Olives, the Church of All Nations that we'll be at tomorrow. The Russian Orthodox Church of Mary Magdalene with its golden domes. And now we drive along the Temple Mount wall and look over at the Mount of Olives across the Kedron Valley. That's the area you'll be walking in tomorrow, from top right to bottom left. And as we look across, we see one of the most expensive cemeteries in the world to be buried in. As we round the southern end of the Temple Mount, we see Silwan, an Arab village, and there is the tomb of Pharaoh's daughter, a wife of Solomon. And now we're at the observation point, looking at Silwan. This is probably what the city of David might have looked like, one house upon another coming down the hill. And over here, this is the Temple Mount, the southern end. We'll be there tomorrow also. Looking the other way, we see the Greek Orthodox Church in Akeldama, the field of blood. This is the field that was bought by the blood money of Jesus and contains many graves across it. And between us and it is the Hinnom Valley, or Gehenna, hell, Jesus said. And this is the Kedron Valley. It flows all the way down to the Dead Sea. Down there is Ein Rogel. It's a naturally flowing spring that Adonijah came to try and be anointed king. He was one of David's sons, but David heard about it and had Solomon anointed instead. And now we go to St. Peter in Galicantu, or St. Peter of the Cockcrow. This is the traditional place where Caiaphas' house was and where Jesus was tried before him. This is also the place where Peter denied him 3 times. In the 400s, a Byzantine church was built here and destroyed in 614 by the Persians, rebuilt in the 1200s by the Crusaders, and the current church was built in 1931. There are several pieces of archaeological information that points this may be the authentic site, the place of Corban, the grain silo, the Byzantine church foundations, and mikvah baths. All of these would have been in priestly homes, and especially the high priest home. And these steps lead up from the valley below into the city, so this would have been a major thoroughfare. Many people think that these are the steps that Jesus would have been led up after his arrest, and you used to be able to walk out on them and sit on them, but now you can't. I said this is the place that Peter denied Jesus. There's only one other place a charcoal fire is mentioned in the Bible, and that's at the place where Jesus feeds the disciples on the Sea of Galilee and asks Peter, "Do you love me more than these?" Inside we see the courtyard with its stones that Peter might have been sitting in when he denied Jesus. In the middle of this courtyard is an opening that goes down into a cistern, and many people think this is the place that Jesus would have been held after his trial. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but we'll not be going upstairs, but let's look at a few pictures of the beautiful church upstairs. If we had time to go, we would have seen this. As we head below, first we come to the detention or jail area. It seems this was a place they held prisoners, and there are places where you can tie hands so you can scourge somebody. You also have a window that you can look over and see the cistern, which would have been an ideal prison. Most people think that Jesus was bound and dropped into this cistern through the hole at number 2. The hole at number 1 would not have been there. And then a stone put on top, so he'd have been tied up in a totally dark, wet, cold pit. And you can see the crosses that have been carved here through the ages. To get in, you go down through these steps that were not there in Jesus' day.
Lord, you are the God who saves me. Day and night I cry out to you. May my prayer come before you. Turn your ear to my cry. I am overwhelmed with troubles, and my life draws near to death. I am counted among those who go down to the pit. I am like one without strength. I am set apart with the dead, like the slain who lie in the grave, whom you remember no more, who are cut off from your care. You have put me in the lowest pit in the darkest depths. Your wrath lies heavily on me. You have overwhelmed me with all your waves. You have taken from me my closest friends and have made me repulsive to them. I am confined and cannot escape. My eyes are dim with grief. I call to you, Lord, every day. I spread out my hands to you. Do you show your wonders to the dead? Do their spirits rise up and praise you? Is your love declared in the grave, your faithfulness in destruction? Are your wonders known in the place of darkness, or your righteous deeds in the land of oblivion? But I cry to you for help, Lord. In the morning my prayer comes before you. Why, Lord, do you reject me and hide your face from me? From my youth I have suffered and been close to death. I have borne your terrors and am in despair. Your wrath has swept over me. Your terrors have destroyed me. All day long they surround me like a flood. They have completely engulfed me. You have taken me from friend and neighbor. Darkness is my closest friend.
On a hill far away, stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. And I love that old cross, where the dearest and best for a world of lost sinners was slain. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross. Till my trophies at last I lay down, I will cling to the old rugged cross, and exchange it someday for a crown.
Let's pray. Father, as we stand here, we remember all that our salvation cost, not just the cross, but beatings and whippings, loneliness, despair maybe, and everything else that your Son had to go through so we can call ourselves Christians and someday go to heaven. Help us, Father, to truly grasp how much you love us, that you would put your Son through that just to have us as your children. And all the people said, Amen.
15th century, everything that was in Jerusalem was within the city walls that were built by the Turks, by Suleiman the Magnificent at the 16th century. The first big step of building modern Jerusalem was this neighborhood that you see to the left of us, that also has a windmill in it. The windmill was built to start the industry of grinding wheat to make flour. The only problem was that even though all the parts were brought here from England, they never checked the wings well enough, and it never rotated thanks to the wind.
As we drive to Bethlehem, we note that most of the people who live in Jerusalem live in apartments. There are very, very, very few single-family dwellings. And now we arrive at the checkpoint. We're about to enter another country, Palestine, and there's a wall around it to keep people in Bethlehem, and only one gate through. It sometimes takes people from Palestine 3 to 4 hours just to pass through the security here and get into Israel. And they would be going through these buildings and these areas. And now welcome to Palestine. You can see the security wall winding through Bethlehem, sometimes right down the middle of a street, so people who used to live across from each other now have to spend hours to get to go and visit. And this is what Bethlehem looks like as we drive through it. Bethlehem is now 90% Muslim as Christians continue to leave because of persecution. Remember, this is where Rachel was buried. This is where Ruth lived and David. This is where Jesus was born. Many Christian events happened here.
The Lord's Prayer. شيمابو وبرو والروح حايو قاديشو آبون بشمايو نتقاداش شموخ تيثو ملكوثو نهو صبيونو أي كانوا بشمايو أفبرعو هبلا اللحو سبقونو يومونو واشبقلا حوبين وحطوهين أي كانوا الدوف إحنا نشباق الحيوبين لوت على النسيونو إيلو فصولان من بيشو ميطول تلوخي ملكوثو وحيلو تشبحتو والعولم علمين آمين.
It's now time to head down to the olive wood factory and look at it. And this is how they start off making the olive wood statue. They take the large scraps of wood and cut them out to make nativities inside them. Now it's time to go do a little shopping in the store. We'll be eating at the Nissan Brothers restaurant, and while we're eating, let us think about Christmas. They celebrate Christmas 3 times here. On December 25th for the Protestants and Catholics, on January 7th for the Orthodox, and on January 20th for the Armenians. I wonder, does that mean I should be getting 3 Christmas presents? It's now time to head to the church. Some of us will walk up to it, and others will ride up in a taxi. In 135, Hadrian built a temple to Adonis here. And then in 325, Helena came and built this church. The atrium out front, the open space today, was actually part of the church. It was a huge church. In 529, during the Samaritan Revolt, they damaged that church severely, and so Justinian came back and renewed the church. And this is what we see today. This is actually a complex of buildings. This is the Church of the Nativity, the Church of St. Catherine, and the monasteries are over here. Remember that this open area was part of Helena's church originally. And you can see the door has been cut down, so now you have to bend over. All that is except Deborah. And this is what it looks like from the inside looking out. Let's head in. Since this is Palestinian territory, Hannah, our guide, who is Jewish, was not allowed to come in, so George will be our guide while we are here. As you head in, you go into a small room and then into the main worship area. We're waiting in line to go see the crypt area. One of the early church fathers, Origen, says that these columns, all 48 of them, came from the Temple Mount and thus would have been part of the temple in Jesus' day. And this is what it would look like in early morning before the renovations and before a lot of people got here. Since we have to wait in line, we're not going to be able to go over to them, but if we had, we'd be able to see through the doors the original mosaics from Helena's church. This is one of the oldest churches in Christendom because it was not destroyed by the Muslims. They looked at it and said, this looks a whole lot like where we live. So we're not going to destroy it as we did all the other churches. We'll be in line for over an hour because there's a blessing of the cave ceremony going on. This is an active church, and they're getting ready to have baptisms. This is an early morning picture of the steps we're waiting to go down when they weren't so crowded. The Bible does not say they tried to stay in an inn or a motel. They had family in Bethlehem. They would stay with the family. Families would live on this floor, but underneath them would be their stable where they would keep their animals. That kept the animals safe, and it also provided warmth during the winter. But they also had upstairs a small room called the Catalum, or upper room, same word they used for the upper room for the Last Supper. But it was full, so they had to stay in the stable. It was the cleanest and most private place in the house at that time. We're going to be looking at the caves underneath the church that would have been stables, one of which was pointed out as the place of Jesus' birth within 100 years of his life. We're going to go down these steps, and then we're going to visit the birthplace, go see the manger, and then go up these steps. Now all we have to do is look around before we can get to the steps. The star is made up of 14 points for the 14 stations of the cross, and moving it in 1847 by the Greeks started the Crimean War. It's now been put back. Is this the actual birthplace of Jesus? Nothing is that certain. But we do know that since within 100 years of Jesus' death, this has been pointed out as the place where it actually happened and where he was born. There's good evidence to support the fact that this might just be that place. If not, it's pretty close to here. I personally accept it as an authentic site. And over here is supposedly where the manger was. He was laid in after his birth. Most people don't notice the small door in the back. It leads to the rest of the cave complexes. That's number 4 on this map. It's usually closed. And then it's time to head up the steps and to leave. Not near as crowded as going down. Next we go next door to the Church of St. Catherine's, one of the Christian saints, but we don't have time to go down into the crypt. So I'm going to take you from some pictures I've taken before. We'll go down these steps. As we come to the bottom of the steps, we come to the Chapel of the Innocents, to remind us of the children that were killed here. To the left is a cavern that if you look in, it said you can see the star that fell there. I've never seen it. And then next to that is the place where Joseph supposedly dreamed his dream to go to Egypt. In 384, Jerome came to this room to take the Greek and Hebrew Old Testament, New Testament, and translate them for the first time into one Bible in Latin called the Vulgate. And this is the door that you could go to go into the crypt where the Nativity is. And Jerome's standing here translating the Bible. And now as we drive over the Shepherd's Field Church, we need to remember we're on the edge of the wilderness here. People like Boaz was a farmer here. And Ruth in these fields did her gleaning. And there was a little boy named David that shepherded his sheep here. And of course, the birth of Jesus and the shepherds that were there during that. Let's think about them for a while. This is a traditional place to remember the shepherds who were in their fields. Were they here? Probably not. But it's a good place to remember. Note that the altar is held up by 3 praying shepherds. Outside is a fountain to remind us of Jesus being the Good Shepherd. And then we go in back to see a cave that maybe shepherds kept sheep in at night. The sheep around Bethlehem were kept and raised in order to make the sacrifices at the temple. So when they came to tell them they had a new baby lamb,
how still we see thee lie, above thy deep and dreamless sleep, the silent stars go by, yet in thy dark streets shineth the everlasting light. The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight.
in this area was a 4th century Byzantine church and monastery. It was destroyed by the Muslims and never rebuilt. You can see some of the ruins here. But maybe the most important thing to do here is to look over and see that we are right on the edge of the wilderness. To the left would be farming, to the right would be shepherds. Is this where David kept his sheep? Who knows? And now it's time to head back into Jerusalem for our hotel for the night. We'll be staying at the Jerusalem Dan Hotel. Upon arriving, it's time to unload our bus and head inside for a good night's rest.
Well, you sure are giving me a workout. I am almost running my wheels off trying to keep up with all the places that you are going, and you sure have been buying a lot of souvenirs. I think your suitcases have gained 20 pounds each since you came here, not to speak of some of you at the supper bars. Well, I was designed to carry all that weight, so I guess it is working out all right. Also, all those iPhones are really pulling a lot of power charging all the time. I am glad I have been able to keep you cool on these hot days. Now just sit back and enjoy the view as I continue to roll on along in this land where Jesus walked. Hey, aren't you glad you have me so you don't have to walk all of it?
This brings us to the end of day 5.